Welcome to episode 139 of the Band Hive Podcast. It is time for another episode of the Band Hive Podcast. My name is James Cross, and I'm here with a very special guest, Robbie Litchfield of the band Saving Vice. How's it going today, Robbie?
I'm doing well, James. How are you?
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm doing pretty well. You can't see it. I got totally sunburned last week, so that's not the most comfortable, but I mean, it's summer, so whatever, it's worth it, right?
Yeah, I got sunburnt myself on July 4th. I was out playing wiffle ball with my cousins and everything. The next day, I couldn't feel a single thing in my body. I was laying out diving for catches and stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm 27. I can't do what I used to when I was 18. So yeah, so I've been sunburnt and all sore, so I feel that.
Oh, man. Well, I feel like that's a perfect segue. I was bringing that up because I was going to say before the episode, you were mentioning how you got this rechargeable fan, and one of those would be really amazing for me right now. So I'm sure you've been using that the past couple days with your sunburn.
Yeah, no, I love fans, man, especially when I'm trying to sleep. I don't know if I'm weird like that. Like I said, I know we talked a little bit earlier about this, but when we're on tour, having that rechargeable fan, I wish I could tell everyone what brand it is. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's literally in our band van, which I'm looking at right now. So it's basically this $100 rechargeable 10-inch fan. And I purchased it right before we went on tour. And it is the perfect volume, the perfect amount of breeze. I don't know. It's great. It lasts up to 5 hours. So that's really helped me be able to sleep with that background white noise.
Absolutely. Stuff like that. Just the little comforts. Having those in a van makes such a big difference. Anyway, you mentioned tour. That's really what we're here to talk to you about. So you are the guitarist and founding member of Saving Vice, as well as you have Tyler and Chase both on vocals, Kenjamin on bass, and Sam on drums. That is the lineup of Saving Vice. If you haven't been following the independent band news of the last few months, maybe you've heard of Saving Vice, maybe you haven't, but Saving Vice, you guys are from Vermont, which is awesome because I'm from Vermont. Super stoked to have you on the podcast, and somehow I still haven't seen you live, even though you play here all the time. But we're here today to specifically talk about your recent tour without Lil Xan, which was supposed to be with Lil Xan, but, well, we'll get there. So, Robbie, before we jump in, can you go back to 2017, 2018 when you started Saving Vice and just give us the history of the band for the people who are listening and don't know you?
So in 2016, I was still in college at the time. I went to St. Michael's College up in Colchester, Vermont. I knew I wanted to start a band. So what I did when I was in college was I actually had a pop punk cover band. And that was a lot of fun. We played some house parties. We even played out in the Burlington area. And then I realized I really want to make original music. I don't want to play other people's songs, as fun as it was at the time. And I wanted to explore metalcore, which was my real passion. I mean, I do love pop punk, but metalcore was kind of where I wanted to go creatively at the time. So in 2016, I basically went on Craigslist, tried to find band members, which is a whole podcast story in itself. But over the years, we basically built the lineup. In 2017, we put our debut EP, Lost Words, into the world. The reason a lot of you listening to this might be scratching your heads is we took down that EP and rebranded in 2018 and put out our new official debut EP, Colder Than Dark. And that's pretty much the general story of the founding of Saving Vice.
Yeah, and so now you've been around for about 5 years, and you lined up a really interesting kind of cross-genre tour. So it was you and Dropout Kings and Lil Xan. Now, it's supposed to happen in May and June of this year, so just about a month and a half ago. And then everything kind of fell apart. So can you tell us the story of how that tour came together, and then we'll get into what actually happened once you were out on the road?
Yeah, our agent at the time, Ashley Ventura, us and Dropout Kings were her clients. She also signed Lil Xan. And basically, we were all part of the same agency, which was a Mac agency based in LA. Which is really funny because it's a hip-hop agency, but, we're a pretty much metalcore band, so we were definitely a black sheep on that roster. But yeah, no, I mean, the idea was great. I mean, to have a multi-genre bill, basically, us being metalcore. We had a couple rappers in the mix, Rosh Dog, Jupiter's Tirade, and then we had Dropout Kings, who are obviously new metal with a lot of hip-hop elements, for those of you who haven't heard of them. And they're great friends of ours, by the way. We've toured with them before. And then Lil Xan, obviously, I don't need to say much about him. He's kind of one of those big, TMZ figureheads, tons of memes of him out there. And yeah, so I thought it was really cool. I mean, the idea of having like hip hop kids come out to these shows, be exposed to metal, because as counterintuitive as it sounds, like there are a lot of parallels between the genres. And we're seeing that now more than ever. Artists like MGK, Nothing Nowhere, Ghostmane, etc. These people that are just kind of like bleeding the worlds together. And I think it's beautiful personally. So I think conceptually, like the tour was really set to do something special. I mean, we had a lot of publicity even before all the drama came about. It was just a really interesting, cool lineup. I was super excited when we announced it. So as far as the story goes, this isn't me just trying to be political. I genuinely don't know what actually happened at the end of the day. All I do know is that we drove all the way down to Dallas, Texas for So What Festival. Same thing with Dropout Kings. They were there as well. And the second we got down there, my bass player, who's probably the most like worry guy in the band, Kenjamin, we were at like this Airbnb that we were staying at for the weekend for the festival. He just comes into the living room, looked like he saw a ghost sort of thing. And he's just like, Lil Xan just canceled the tour. And we were all just like, what? Like, we thought he was like, f***ing with us or whatever. So we're all like, what are you talking about, bro? And he's like, look at his Instagram story. And he basically like made this post on his feed or his story or whatever, basically saying he's not doing the tour, didn't really feel like it, whatever. And he was like sending a bunch of sass towards Ashley. I think he even called her out by name, which is super unprofessional and inappropriate in my opinion. So that was terrible. And then, yeah, so like us and Dropout Kings were like, dude, like what the f-? Like we're already here ready to do this tour. And then basically what ended up happening was he just dropped off. He didn't even show up for a set at So What Festival. He was supposed to play that. So he was just no call, no show. So clearly, again, I can't like speak on behalf of the guy. Maybe it was he didn't want to have that physical interaction, but like clearly it wasn't just the tour. He didn't show up for his set at So What Festival down in Dallas. So like it wasn't like necessarily the tour itself he had an issue with. Like he didn't even show up for his set at a major festival in Dallas. So like clearly there was something else going on, in my opinion. Again, it's all theories at this point. He's given 3-4 different public explanations, deleted them all of his posts. Like dude's just not making sense. But honestly, James, like at a certain point, yeah, it sucked when we got that news, and it was definitely really rough. We had a lot of financial dependency on this tour happening and going smoothly, which maybe we can dive into a little bit if you want. But we got over it pretty quick because it's kind of like, all right, there's nothing we can do right now to really solve this. We did talk to Dropout Kings because obviously we're all there together at So What Festival. And they're like, yeah, I think we're going to basically, their strategy was to make a big public thing out of it, which is fine. I felt kind of like we were like, the child in the backseat of the car while mom and dad were fighting. That's kind of how it felt to be in Saving Vice at the time. So Dropout Kings basically brought on all this press. TMZ covered it and all these big hip hop news outlets. So we were kind of like dragged into that a little bit, which is fine because like, again, there's a lot of publicity around our name too. And I'll tell you, man, like our whole world got turned upside down and we had to make split decisions like in a matter of seconds. And it was just crazy how I had Ashley hitting me up and Adam, who's my friend from Dropout Kings. He's the vocalist. Three of us were kind of talking interchangeably and they're like, we're going to still do this tour. Ashley's working her ass off to salvage as many of these dates as possible so that we could still do the tour, even though the guarantees are out the window. Now it's a door deal type thing. It's whatever. But it's something that a lot of bands probably would have packed up their bags and went home, cut their losses. But for us, it's like, nah, man, like we've been waiting for this forever. The pandemic was brutal on everybody. We want to go out there and we don't care if like the money's not there. Like we're going to go and do this. Like we're already here. So we all made that decision as well as, Dropout Kings. And I made a flyer. So I do graphic design. I used to do it like for a living. That used to be like my side hustle, whatever. And I kind of retired my varsity jacket after a few years. I really don't like doing it, but I can do it. And I did do it. So I redid the flyer, tried to keep the color palette the same, everything. So I recreated the Born Dead tour flyer in a matter of 2 hours. And I was with Tyler, who's not on this podcast, unfortunately, but Tyler is my vocalist. He's kind of like the branding guy in our band. So him and I were just hunched over my laptop, my MacBook Pro in Photoshop, trying to make this flyer so that we could announce it. Because Adam was like, yo, if I'm going to do this press stuff, we need to have a new tour announced to be like, you, Lil Xan, whatever. So like, I don't know about you, James. I know you do like the production stuff too. I like to like give updates along the way so that I make sure I'm not wasting my time and the client's happy with what they're getting. Like, hey, so far, how do these tones sound? Whatever. So in terms of graphic design, I take a similar approach and I'm giving Adam these updates. And then I send him like the 95% done flyer. Like I still got to send her some stuff and, like housekeeping, cleaning stuff up. And I say, hey, like, I'm wrapping stuff up right now. How does this look? And I sent it to him over text. And then like 5 minutes later, he responds. He's like, looks dope. Just posted it. And like, you what? It's like that SpongeBob meme of that guy. Like, you what? And he goes out. And I look on Facebook and it's already trending and shit. Like it's already viral. I didn't finish it. It's not the final master file. And he's like, yo, can you get me like the Instagram assets? I'm like, bro, like what the fuck? He has the audacity to be like, yo, give me the story post and all this stuff. I'm like, bro. So I'm like working my ass off all night. I'm already stressed out. And now I have to clean up this flyer, get the Google Drive link set up. And I'm like, oh my God, I have like a Square version for Instagram. And I'm like, I did not plan on doing this all night. Like this was like a, hey, tomorrow morning, we'll have our coffee and do this. And he's like, nope, just post it. I'm like, dude, it's like sending a client like the first draft of a mix and there's other stuff you got to do. And they just like upload it on DistroKid anyway. It's like, bro, like I'm not done. It's
already
yet.
on Spotify. Dude, I said it wasn't done. What?
Yeah, I appreciate the vote of confidence, man. But like, geez, like let's, you know what I mean? Like, let's think about this a little. But luckily it looked good enough. I mean, it was like 95% done. It was just some like nudging stuff around, so.
I didn't notice anything looked off. So, I mean.
No, I mean, yeah. And I'm an ultra perfectionist. Anyone will tell you that knows me. So maybe I was overthinking it, but I just was like, you what? Like I was so, oh man, that was funny. Not at the time, but looking back, it was hilarious.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you guys on the show, which is now just you since Tyler wasn't able to make it, you stayed positive, at least publicly. I'm sure there was lots of like anger and frustration going on internally. But when it came to your public posts, you guys basically just said, this is what's going on. It sucks, but we're going to get through it. And this is what we're trying to do. You communicated with your fans openly and honestly without disparaging anyone. And so many artists would have just turned around, like you said, packed up their bags, or they would have said, oh, Lil Xan is a terrible person, like he's screwing us over, that sucks. And, you guys basically just said, we're not happy, but we don't know what happened. So, like, we're going to do the best thing we can. But there's one thing, or I guess two things that you didn't mention yet, which is you got to Texas and your van broke as well. Not once, but twice.
There was like a third thing that happened that we didn't even publicly announce because we were like, nope. It was too embarrassing. I'll tell you about that, though, here on this podcast, for sure.
Let's head into the van, and then we can get to that third thing and break the news.
Yeah, so basically what happened, oh, man, I spent, the past few weeks, ever since we've been home, I've been trying so hard to repress that stuff. So this is really like, I feel like I'm talking to a therapist, like, all right, let's talk about what happened. Like all this trauma that you went through, like let's hold hands and do this together. So I apologize if my memory's a little hazy. It's on purpose. I tried to delete that hard drive. So let's see here. When we got to Texas, pretty much when we got to the Airbnb, we had a garage that we backed up our trailer into. We have a little 5x8, which is super annoying, but in this one case, it's really convenient. So we backed up our 5x8 trailer into this garage, shut it, and I went to like basically get out of the parking lot, and I put in reverse, except when it was in reverse, it wasn't like moving. It was almost like it was in neutral, like it wasn't catching. And I'm like, that's weird. So I turned it off, off and on, just like typical IT troubleshooting type stuff. And I'm like, man, I was like, I can't get this thing in reverse. I had other members try it in case I was just like being an idiot or whatever at the moment. And no one could figure it out. So we basically were like, damn. So we drove to a mechanic shop. The guy looked at it and immediately was like, dude, your transmission is f***ed. Like, it's toast. we're like, holy shit. Like, obviously, as you know, that's like one of the worst things you could have break in your vehicle next to maybe the engine. So, you know, the transmission going out was brutal, especially because we're in Texas, completely foreign land. We've never been in. We're in an Airbnb. It's a holiday weekend, right? It's a Memorial Day weekend. So, and this was on a Friday we figured this out. So no chance this was getting touched till Tuesday at the earliest. And the mechanic shop we brought it to, they're like, you know, we can do what we can, but you're better off just getting it towed to a place that specializes in transmissions. We got some homies down the street at Eagle Transmission down in Arlington, Texas. Shout out to them. So we did that. We called them up and they did a free tow for us because they felt so bad. They towed our van there. You know, sure enough, next week they worked on it. It took a few days because the transmission that they ordered was taking forever. Meanwhile, we're trying to salvage the Born Dead tour that we just talked about. We made the new flyer. And inherently, we're already missing dates on that because it takes time to get a transmission. And, you know, we had the thought about like, oh, do we rent a van kind of thing? But the amount of money we would sink into renting a van. And then later, I get home and what? I got to fucking fly down to Arlington, Texas with my buddy or something. And then we go drive it back up to New York. Like that makes no sense. And we'd spend easily like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 extra on top of everything to do that. And we're not making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a night at these shows, especially now that they're door deals. Even though these are markets we played before and we would draw heads, it just like financially was not even close to making sense. And I know there might have been some frustration from some of the other parties, but that's the business decision we made, bro. And at the end of the day, you have to look at your numbers and like, we talked about principle earlier, and it's like, yeah, you know, you want to play shows that you can. If you lose a little bit of money to make it happen, great. But I mean, we're talking like 4 digits difference. The amount of money we would have played at these shows doesn't touch what we would have made having a rental van and doing those dates. So it just didn't make sense. Plus, we were under the impression we would have this transmission within a couple days fixed, which is what happened. We had it that next Friday, which is great. We were on the road. We drove about 30 minutes out of Arlington and we were like on our way to Arkansas or whatever. I think we were going to Pennsylvania. I think that was the stop where we were trying to go. And basically what ended up happening was about 30 minutes in, Chase is driving and I'm in the passenger seat as like the navigator. And basically 30 minutes out of Texas, it's just like he's revving and it's like, whoo, like it's not catching. And I'm like, that doesn't sound good. And he got really nervous at first. I had all this cognitive dissonance. Like, dude, we just got a new transmission. Like, you know what I mean? We crowdfunded this. Like, there's no way. Like, there's no way it's f***ed up again. I was like, this is what new transmissions sound like, you know? And then they kept happening. And I'm like, okay, like, that's weird. Like, it got almost worse. And then Sam, our drummer, he's just like, oh, you just got to break it in. I swear to God. I'm like, Sam, I was like, this is a transmission, not a fucking baseball mitt, dude. Like, you don't break in a transmission. As soon as he said that, I'm like, we got to pull over. Like, that. So we pulled over. We called the mechanic, described the symptoms we were experiencing. He's like, yeah. He's like, that's not supposed to happen, period. And you could tell he was so embarrassed. So he had his guy go tow us. And we're so miserable, bro. We're so miserable. And so he has a guy come tow the van back. Keep in mind, we're like 30, 45 minutes north of Arlington at this point. So this was an hours long process. We end up Ubering back to the mechanic shop. He looks and he's like, guys, I really like hate to say this. He goes, the transmission we put in there is a dud. And he's like, it's like lottery ticket level bad luck. Like you just got a dud transmission. And it's luckily it was all under warranty. So we didn't pay a dime for any of this.
Yeah. Well, you better not.
Yeah, exactly. No. Yeah. Like it was all under warranty. It was their, I don't want to say fuck up because it's not even really a fuck up. It was a bad luck situation. They got a dud transmission, you know? Basically, they're like, all right, we got to get a new one. It's covered under warranty. And basically, we stayed at a hotel for a few days until we found out more information about the transmission, the new one. So that's what ended up happening. We got a new transmission. I think we were back on the road that next Wednesday or something like that. So we're missing even more dates. It's just brutal, man. It just feels like we're flipping a coin and it just keeps landing on tails. And you're like, nuh-uh. No way. Like, it's lottery ticket level bad luck. That's the best way I can describe it. How many times can you flip a coin and land on tails before you get a heads? Like, it's not even really a failure. It's just like bad things happening. Like, the metal gods just did not want us to play these shows or something. And then we finally get the transmission fixed. They do a thorough test drive to make sure they're not sending us out again with another dud. We're back on the road. We're on our way to, this time we're on our way to Pennsylvania. So I must have been talking about something different before. So we are on our way to Pennsylvania and we're cheering and we're just like so happy to get out of Texas. We were there for like 2 weeks straight. We're approaching the Arkansas border because that's the way we're headed. And like, I swear to God, bro, like 10 miles before the border, and we didn't post this at all, by the way. This is probably breaking news to a lot of people. We blew a tire. I swear to God. Luckily, we have spares for everything. And at this point, we're just seasoned vets with the problem solving. And, you know, we had a second to pout. And then I was like, all right, let's get AAA on the line. This was a Friday. Now that I think about it, and I'm like, we're not getting trapped here another weekend. Absolutely screw that. We're not doing that. So we call up AAA and guy comes in like, I don't know, 20 minutes. He basically throws on our spare. We put our, you know, the one that's blown to pieces in the trailer. We take the next exit. We go to a discount tire and they give us all brand new tires, which was dope. While we were there, we got an oil change because why not? And had some food and we were back on our way as if nothing happened. The tire guy was like, yeah, he's like, your tires haven't been swapped since these are like the stock tires. Like you're supposed to change them like at max every 6 years, especially as a touring band. And he's like, in these Texas, like how hot the pavement is down there, like your tires are going to blow if you're not careful. So we were due for a brand new set of tires. If it didn't happen in Texas, it would have happened somewhere else, sort of thing. So in a weird way, it was kind of like fortuitous looking back. But yeah, we were back on our way and we continued the tour, picked up in Pennsylvania. So we missed half the dates of the newly booked tour with Dropout Kings, which was a real bummer. But we finished it out. We played Pennsylvania. We played the other dates. And we went home. And I think we all probably cried a little bit in the shower, you know. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, like the morale of the band is definitely in a weird spot right now. We had a lot of soul searching to do and a lot of things that we wanted to figure out, you know. But I do think that I speak on behalf of the rest of the guys that we want nothing more to be back on the road and do this again and prove to ourselves and everybody else that we can do this and that this was just a fluke out of our control. Because there's nothing worse, James, than like letting fans down. You know, people that were looking forward to coming out to a show to see you and meet you, perhaps for the first time, and you're unable to do it. And I just don't want people to be nervous buying Saving Vice tickets. Like, I want people to feel confident that we're going to do it. And, you know, it's just one of those things where it happens. I was so insecure about it at first. And by the end of this tour, I just kind of made peace with it because it's like, you know what? Like, there's only so much you can do. The best you can do is problem solve and figure out how to get back on the road and make smart business decisions. And people will have to understand. And if they don't, then that's on them. You know, you mentioned how we kept our spirits up. I think that's because we made peace with the situation because there's no change in the past. So what can we do now to make this better?
I think that's a great way to look at it. And to kind of go back to what you're saying a few seconds ago about you want your fans to feel safe buying Saving Vice tickets. I think if they're a true fan who's been following this story, they're going to see, hey, you did everything you absolutely could. Little Zan bailed. The transmission blew. The second transmission was a dud. Now the tire, like all of that stuff, you made the shows that were at all possible happen, you know, within reason. Like you weren't going to spend $5,000 on a rental van and then flying back and all that. I don't think anybody would expect you to do that. And if they do, they have a very warped view of the music business for independent artists.
We had a few people that were saying, why don't you just get a rental? But it's just like, bro, like the numbers were nowhere near matching up. Like it just made no business sense whatsoever. I mean, if it was like we'd be out a couple $100 kind of thing, then, you know, maybe we consider it. But like we're talking like career debilitating types of money. As you know, working with a lot of bands and touring and stuff, you invest a lot before you go on the road. People don't realize this too. It's like you have to order that merch, man. You have to get your gear set up. You have to do all these things before you head out on the road. So there is a lot of trust that things are going to go smoothly. I mean, luckily we do sell a lot of merch. So, I mean, we weren't terrible in that aspect. But my point is that, like, you know, if something doesn't happen, that's cool that you're sitting on a mountain of merch, but that bill still needs to get paid. They don't give a if you broke down or not. They don't give a Okay, well, you owe me $5,000 for all this merch, so that's cool. They're getting their money, is my point. So it's kind of like you invest a lot. A lot of bands do this. You saw it last year. Spirit Box was supposed to go out with Limp Bizkit, and the tour didn't end up happening. I think someone in Limp Bizkit, one of their crew or someone really vital to the touring process, ended up getting COVID, and they had to cancel the whole thing. So Spirit Box, this was like a whole big press thing. They were out something like 10 grand because from all the merch they ordered for the tour. And I think the Limp Bizkit team ended up compensating them or helping them out somehow to help pay for it. But that just goes to show, like, one wrong thing can, like, cripple a band. And that's exactly what happened to us. Like, do you think I want to do a GoFundMe, or any of us for that matter? Of course not. I want to be independent. I want to be able to do this. But the fact that we did a GoFundMe, it was like our arms were tied behind our back. You know what I mean? Like, we just had no other option. It was either that or just, like, quit altogether. And luckily, you know, we raised the money in a couple days. We had donations from a lot of great people. Ronnie Radke reached out personally and PayPal'd us some money for gas, which was incredible. And a lot of the other guys in the metalcore scene, I had Chris Motionless reach out, Telly from the Word Alive reach out to me in the band. So it was really cool just to see the whole community coming together around all of the negative stuff that was happening. So it was like there was a lot of beautiful things as well as really traumatizing stuff. So it was a very weird time in our band. A lot of mixed emotions.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the kind of thing, it's tough. Like, when I put together a budget for a band going on tour, I always say, like, hey, make sure you have some emergency budget aside. But you can't figure in, like, oh, the van is going to die twice and the headliner is going to bail. You'd have to budget for 3 times what the tour is actually going to cost. You just can't factor that in.
You know, and it's so funny you say that because, James, I listened to the Band Hive podcast before this tour. I think I even told you that. I listened to a few episodes, and it was really informative. There was some good stuff in there. A lot of what I already knew, but there were some interesting new ideas I never considered. And I made sure when we got ready for this tour, we all sat right here in my studio. I had guys on the couch, everything. I had my big monitor set up, and we went over budget and routing. And I'm like, look, gas is $4.80 right now. Let's round up to $5. I'm always conservative with budgets.
Exactly how you should be. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you never know. Luckily, gas was a lot cheaper in the South, which I didn't anticipate, but that's dope. Atlanta, Georgia. Shout out to Atlanta. I don't know what they're doing down there, but gas was like $1 cheaper than New York. So that was cool. But anyways, you know, we basically went over the budget and like, all right, here's our food budget. This is what we're going to be doing for gas, which is quite literally the biggest expense you're going to have. So I was all like confident. I was like, man, we got the routing figured out. We got the blah, 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 blah. It just goes to show you, I guess the biggest lesson I learned from this was that, like, no matter how much you plan, and planning is important, and I'm a big planner. In fact, I'm an overthinker, over-planner, in my opinion. But planning is super important. Every 10 minutes of planning saves an hour of work. That's one of my favorite sayings. I don't know where I heard that, but it's a great saying. And the biggest thing I learned was that the biggest consistency is inconsistency when you're on tour. Like, you're going to have to improv. You're going to have to make split decisions in the matter of a minute. Big financial decisions, right? In the span of seconds, you have to make a call. And I was kind of like the self-titled tour manager of the tour. And it was just like so brutal, man. It just, everything about it was just like having to make these decisions. And obviously I consult everybody too, but at the end of the day, it's like I'm calling the shot. So it's like, I got to be right. You know what I mean? And it's like sometimes you're making decisions on things that haven't even happened yet. And you're like, all right, well, probability says this is going to happen. And like I told you about the coin flipping, man, the amount of times I bet on heads that ended up being tails was crazy. You know what I mean? Should we get an Airbnb for this many nights? Because they don't give a fuck about your situation. They just want to know how many nights you want. I don't know how many nights we want because I don't know how fucking long we're going to be here. You know? So it's like you have to make an educated guess. And I'm wrong, obviously, because we keep flipping tails. That was probably the most stressful thing for me. It was just like, man, how many times can you flip tails? Like, you know what I mean? And then you bet on tails and you get a heads and you're like, cool, all right, sick. You know, like, maybe I'm speaking like a crazy person here. I don't know if anyone really understands, but it's the best way I can describe what it was like.
Yeah. To me, it totally makes sense. And that might be from, having that experience of everything goes wrong. Not to the same extent you've had it go wrong, thankfully. But for some artists who are listening and they haven't had that experience of like literally everything can and will go wrong on tour, I don't know, maybe it's abstract to them. But I guess kind of to pivot here, we've touched on how you kept that positive mindset. And I got to think that was a conscious decision. Like, hey, we're not going to go talking shit about anyone. We're not going to complain. Like, we're going to just tell people what's going on and make this the best it can possibly be, right? Or was that just kind of a natural thing?
That was deliberate. I mean, we were pissed, and especially seeing Dropout Kings and the amount of buzz they were generating around this. It was very natural for us to want to go out there and get upset and whatever. But at the end of the day, we spoke with Ashley. She highly advised that we kind of keep it to ourselves, sort of thing. And I agree. I agree with her. I think it was the right move because at the end of the day, when you look long term, and this isn't a knock on Dropout Kings, they handle it how their team decided they wanted to handle it. And you could argue it did really well for them, and it probably did. But for us, like, we want to be known as a really, professional band. I don't want to, we don't want to be involved with all that type of negative drama type stuff. And it's just one of those things where, yeah, it was a political decision for sure to abstain from that. And I'm a big believer in just laying out the Carfax, bro. Lay out the Carfax and let other people get upset for you. And that's what we did. And it worked. And like, our fans were up in arms about it, but it wasn't a call to action. We weren't leading the mob. We just said, hey, this is what happened. And then they went out and did what they felt like they had to do, which is great that they have our backs and it was cool to see. But it was a deliberate decision to stay out of it for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the right move. And, I didn't really pay too much attention to what Dropout Kings were saying because I don't follow them. So they do whatever they want. But I think for you guys, that was the right choice.
For our band, that was the right choice. For their band, that was what they felt was the right choice. And like I said, I think it worked for their case. But for our band, it's not our style, I guess. So, we want to be a positive, uplifting band. Our music is about really messed up things in the world and like dealing with that. And it's just one of those things that like we want to stay true to our mission, our beliefs and stuff. We're not a band that wants to beef. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to be a negative Nancy band. Like, we want to stay positive. I think there's a difference between happy-go-lucky in a really bad way and being like positive, like healthily positive, right? We're acknowledging a bunch of shitty things happen, but we're doing the best we can with the situation. So I think there's a balance there is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I think that's a very healthy balance, because if you just treat everything like it doesn't matter, then you kind of desensitize yourself to things that matter and are bad and you should speak up about, which we're seeing so often in this country right now, is that people are desensitized to terrible things. I unintentionally dropped a band pun there.
Nice.
As we kind of wrap things up here, so back in May, right before this tour was supposed to happen, you dropped White Rabbit, which is the most recent song you've put out. And moving forward, what's next for Saving Vice? You mentioned you're kind of all reflecting on what's going on, and you did that show at Higher Ground at the end of June, which from what I heard went really well. So what's in the works for the band that you can talk about?
Yeah, so we have a new agent now, and he's currently working on booking us a bunch of cool stuff later this year. I can't talk too much about that stuff at the moment. I will say that we are playing When We Were Hungry Fest in October. I believe it's Thursday, October 20th in Las Vegas. So we will be routing some stuff around that. So our next big tour will be in October, November. But in the meantime, we'll probably play some one-offs just to kind of keep our feet wet and not go crazy, because we spent 2 years in our houses. So it's like, I want to play shows. We all want to play shows. We made our lives tour ready for this reason. So it's like, we want to go out and do that. Musically speaking, yeah, so White Rabbit was the last release we did. This month on July 29th, we're doing a metalcore cover of Angels and Demons by Jaden Hostler. So that's coming out later this month, which will be really cool. Self-produced by myself again. And then after that, We have a couple songs that we're going to be putting out, I think either late August or early September. I'm not sure yet. These were the songs that we tracked with Justin DeBleek, formerly from Ice Nine Kills, earlier this year. We're going to be putting those songs out in the next couple months, and they slap. And I'm really excited because we haven't put out like a dirty, heavy song in a long time, and we're going to be putting one of those out. Got to keep those fans happy. So I'm really excited about that. That's pretty much all I can say for now, publicly. And like I said, we're home now. We're just trying to save up money, work our asses off so that when we do get back on the road, we're a lot more financially stable. And hopefully the next one can actually go somewhat according to plan.
Yeah. Fingers crossed for that. Two things left is the first, what advice would you give to an artist who wants to hit the road for the first time ever?
Man, it's tough because...
Like, just to pick one thing.
I know, because I would say plan, but I planned and it didn't go according to plan. So that's like...
Have a plan Z, perhaps.
Have a whole file cabinet of backup plans. No, I would say do a bunch of research. Listen to podcasts like James's, go on YouTube, speak with other musicians like myself or other friends of yours in bands that have been doing this for a while, and just kind of like rack up those tips. And at the end of the day, it's like your experience on tour. You can only do so much preparation and planning and research. Like at the end of the day, you have to go out and do it. You know what I mean? You just have to go out and you're going to figure out the nuanced stuff. To have a somewhat successful first tour, I would say do your research. I know it's kind of a broadband type thing, but do your research, talk to people who have already done it, make a Facebook post. I did, and I had 1 billion people comment, and it was great. Most of the stuff I already knew, but there's some stuff that was like, holy shit, like this is a really good idea. And what works for one band might not work for your band, but there are a lot of really good tips out there. You just have to go and look for them and talk with people and network, which you should be doing anyway. But that would be my advice.
All right. Robbie, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here. And I appreciate you taking the time to sit down. Last but not least, where should people go to find Saving Vice?
I think that we do a pretty good job being accessible everywhere. If you want to follow us, Instagram, Facebook, we're very active on. We're on Twitter, TikTok.
At Saving Vice for all of them?
At Saving Vice. I made sure to keep it simple. And that's a pro tip for your bands, for you guys listening. Keep it simple, okay? At your band name, maybe what state you're in if it's taken. You know what I mean? Like something like that. Just keep it very simple and keep it uniform across all platforms. Trust me, it's going to save yourself a ton. Oh, one other thing. Speaking of this. So when we were on tour, I had business cards made. You can go to Staples. And for $20, you can get business cards. If you want to spend a little bit more, you can get nicer ones, which we might do. But we got like 500 business cards for $20. It's got a QR code on it, band logo. You mentioned where can you find us? Like all of our socials, right? Spotify, at Saving Vice, our website, our crest logo on the other side. Clean, simple, easy. You can hand it to people you meet. Because everyone's going to ask you, oh, what band are you in? Hey, here's a card. You can go check us out at your own convenience. You know what I'm saying? We've given out hundreds of these so far, and like it's so effective. So get business cards made. And it's super cheap, so there's no excuse.
Yeah, that's 4 cents a card. You go anywhere for like download cards, it's going to be like 15, 20 cents per download card.
Yeah, like I said, you can spend a little bit more for something nicer, which I would recommend, but we spent literally $20 on 500 cards. And so worth it, dude. Because you're going to, especially when you're on tour, you're going to bump into people all the time. Like at shows, sure, but like grocery stores, right? You meet the host of your Airbnb, whatever, and she's curious. Oh, like you're in a metal band. Like, yeah, here's our card. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just give them out to everybody. It's huge. It's huge.
Oh, I love that tip. That's something that I never thought of. And that's next level there, man. All right, Robbie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have an amazing afternoon and best of luck with the future of the band.
You as well. Thanks for having me.